started. All right, so thank you everyone for coming to our Impact 100 Metro Detroit Coffee and Conversation. We are very excited to have Deb Drennan, this Executive Director for Freedom House Detroit and one of our $100,000 recipients from our most recent grant, join us this morning. So Deb, thank you for being here. Thank you for being one of our grant recipients, and especially one of our newest members. So you just recently joined Impact 100 Metro Detroit, which is exciting as well. So as a reminder, for this is a conversation with many of us, so please put your conversation or your notes and questions in the chat or come off mute and I will ask questions. But Deb, let's just get us started. Can you just talk to us about Freedom House Detroit? Share with us the mission, and what you do at the core of what your work is.
With pride. So Freedom House Detroit is close to 40 years old, serving asylum seekers in the Detroit area. That's meaning people who are fleeing their countries because of persecution and torture, and who find their way to the United States, and then through ambassadors or now the internet, they find their way to Freedom House. And so asylum seekers are refugees. And as we know, refugees are people who are forced for many reasons to flee their country. And there's two different umbrellas for asylum seekers and refugees. So for instance, I think prior to 10 years ago, 10 years ago, we knew refugees as people who were resettled. These are people that are in another country. For instance, they might have come from Congo, they might have come from Rwanda during the genocide, but first found their way into a refugee resettlement camp. And that could be anywhere in the region of Africa. So for instance, Rwanda, those folks often found themselves in Congo and vice versa, ironically. So let's just say someone from Rwanda fled to Congo and they were in a refugee camp there. And the United Nations would then meet with them. They would do the assessment. They would do all of the screening prior to releasing them to one of the countries that has a relationship with the UN. And there's only a few really that are exempt. And they would be assigned to a country. They would be given a loan, and that would cover their airfare and the other costs. And then they would fly to the country. In this case, we'll just say the United States. They'd fly into the United States, and they were granted something called resettlement benefits, refugee resettlement. And then at that moment, although challenging, of course, they were eligible for food stamps, mainstream benefits, right? They could apply for a driver's license. They had been vetted, so they were free and clear to begin a life in the United States. And because of some really wonderful resettlement programs, even here in Michigan, a lot of entrepreneurship, really building lives into the communities where they've settled. So there is yet another population, and these are people who see themselves, they're seeking protection outside of their country. So in this case, the United States. They come to the United States, and as they enter the country, they come with a visa, but then they are meeting and saying, I'm really seeking asylum. I'm seeking protection from my country. And that fits them into another category. They haven't been vetted yet. So the United States simply then, the visa that they arrive on, it changes to, I'm now an asylum seeker. And then that process begins a very long application, legal process. So when you're an asylum seeker, to be eligible to apply for asylum, the individual has to be able to have a key word here, well-founded fear of persecution or torture when they return from if they return to their country. And that would be based on one or a couple of 5 grounds. And that would be they're persecuted or tortured because of their religious beliefs, because of their political opinion, because of their nationality, or because of their race. And then there's a subgroup, what they call other, which has really been in the news a lot lately. And that would mean people who are perhaps from the LGBTQ community, people, women who are domestic violence. And when we say domestic violence, it's not just partner violence like we know here in the United States, but it's gang violence, it's cultural violence, and then there are people who are fleeing their children from childhood marriages or female genital mutilation. So their well-founded fear, they had to flee in order to save their lives, um, and they have to be able to prove that they cannot return to their country because their police or their government will not or cannot protect them. So the people that, when they're leaving their countries, some when they're being persecuted. So I think one of the easiest for us to understand, and I think for me to talk about, is a political opinion. So in this country, if you're on social media, especially Facebook, we have political conversations back and forth. You're right, you're wrong, you're right, you're wrong. We go back, we share our opinions, we even name call. I mean, I'm not an advocate for it. I'm just saying that there is a social discussion. But in many countries, that's not possible. So if you are indeed speaking up for, and remember, this is for democracy, this is for fairness, this is to remove, blatant discrimination and horrific crimes against humans. That's what they're speaking out against. So in those cases, the government certainly doesn't want to be exposed. They don't want the world to know, especially when other countries may be providing resources to the various countries for military support, human aid, etc. So there's this sense of we've got to quiet these people, but they don't do it in a way of any other way but violence and horror. So for those of you who saw our video about our client who with her child knew she had to flee, she advocated for human rights. She had courage to go into places and say, the government is wrong. The military is hurting us. We've got to get a new president. We've got to come to understand that they're taking all our money. We're paying what we would call taxes, and there's embezzlement. There's horrible things happening. We're a country rich in resources, but we're not seeing them because our president or our governments are taking them. These are really courageous people who stand up and say, this is wrong. And our faith tells us it's wrong. Our human dignity tells us it's wrong, and continues to advocate for justice and fairness. Well, eventually, the government will do things to silence them. And first will be, usually it's a kidnapping. And that kidnapping will be, just take them from wherever they are. Usually not always from their workplace. They monitor these people very closely, and then they'll find them walking or even at home with their family. So they'll go to the home and they'll break in and they'll threaten with maybe, just threaten to hurt you. I'll threaten to kill you. I'll threaten to kidnap your child. I'll threaten you. And then the next level will be, then there is the actual crime. And sometimes it begins with these horrible forms of torture, but then they'll go in and they'll beat, they'll rape the women, they'll rape, for instance, if it's a man who's being persecuted, they'll rape his wife or his mother in front of him, or the children, they'll cause harm and threaten children. And in these countries, if the children are kidnapped, they become soldiers. They become forced to become the murderers that they are fleeing against. So these acts will be repeated, and then the psychological torment of having been being part of a victim. So it's all live. It doesn't, we think of, well, that happened, a month ago. Well, it doesn't end, because wherever you go, there are people who will be holding a weapon and just kind of following you, just making sure that they're there and they know where you are. So people then will either flee and go from maybe family to family, friend to friend, finding a safe place, or others will be kidnapped and put into these makeshift prisons, which are not anything like what we know as a prison. A lot of times they're underground, they're feces infested, there's crimes happening within the prisons themselves. So these horrible things that mentally, the mental health part. So it's a physical and emotional turmoil that it's hard to understand. So when people flee, they may be fleeing from one of these prisons, how they escape, either for friends in the night, or one of our alumni who's just a brilliant, brilliant woman who lost, I think, 5 family members to violence because her family was, just so dedicated to human rights. And she was in one of these jails, and every day someone was murdered, from the jail. They didn't release them; they murdered them. So the night before it was her turn to be killed. The night before, someone gave her a bag and gave her what then we called stewardesses, a stewardess uniform, gave her some ID, gave her the visa, and helped her escape. And that happened to be one of the guards. So sometimes even the people that are the oppressors put their lives on the line to save people who are actually in their custody and hands. So she flew to the United States and ended up in Atlanta, not knowing a person, not knowing anything, and found herself outside of a braiding salon. She recognized pictures, the colors of Africa. They even had a map or a logo of Africa in the African colors. And so she felt connected. And it wasn't until someone came out and saw her sitting there for so long with nothing. She had on what she flew to the United States in. And this person, and this is a very typical story, this person asked her, and so in a little high school French and very broken English, was able to ascertain that this woman was in trouble and needed safety. The woman took her in to her home, protected her, fed her, got her, when you're fleeing Africa or Central America in the winter, you're not coming with the right coats and boots and things like that. So the woman got her clothes, and then they went on the internet and found an organization that said, we do know of a place called Freedom House. They're in Detroit. And they paid her way to get here. And so she became a client, and then telling her story of, advocating for a fair election. She was monitoring elections, and she was watching how ballots were illegally placed into the sitting president, even though they were marked. They don't have the computers that we did at the time, but she saw that there were people were actually taking ballots that not meant for the president. And so she was willing to identify that and say, hey, that's wrong. Those don't go there, and they're not for him. And after some time, they actually first asked her, can you join our team? Because they saw they had a really smart woman there. But she said no. And then the story began. And so when she came to Freedom House without any English, again, very typical, no English speaking ability, the culture, the norms, the fear, the anxiety, sleepless nights, nightmares, all the things. And then there was that physical torture, because while she had been raped multiple times, she was also beaten. So we had to get her medical care quickly. Planned Parenthood, while they get a lot of bad rap, they did at the time all of our exams. So we were able to take her to get a really healthy GYN exam, to get medication that she needed because of various infections, and then mental health services. And she applied for asylum, and it was granted. And then she moved into a housing not far from Freedom House. And in time, we actually hired her. Her background was in psychology and hotel management. What better skills to help run a shelter, right? So we brought her in, and she worked with us for several years, and then went back to school. And now she has her degree, and she's working. And with Freedom House, she was able to bring her daughter here. One of her, so she had 3 children, and one was murdered. And but she was able to bring her one son and her daughter here. Her daughter is now married, and mom is a grandmother because of the safety that she was able to find because of Freedom House. So A wonderful story, and it's just, what we do in terms of building lives, keeping families together. And again, the entrepreneurship, the contribution. So socially, the contribution, of course, but the economic contribution, because we have many of our clients, and you can visit our website, and we have a corner where the clients, they're amazing. So we have some who have a restaurant, a Baobab Fair, that's in Midtown Detroit. Another has, I love this, Freedom Cleaning, and his company's been very busy because he cleans up floods, and he has a good Facebook social media presence where he says, we do flood cleaning, we're not just industrial work. So he's been busy doing that. We have others, one that's in North Dakota, and he has a dry cleaning business. And so many stories where through partnerships, to be clear, through partnerships with programs like US, it's it'll come to me, I'm sorry, but there's an entrepreneurship where there's a training, they teach the client how to build their portfolio. And so just amazing services that we're able to provide with existing programs. Even imagine the trauma of seeing law enforcement or hearing sirens, right? So we brought local police in, and at first they wouldn't come in their uniforms. They're so great, the community police, they'd say, we have to carry our weapon, but we'll conceal it. We'll be very careful. And then after time, they were like, now we're going to come in our uniforms so that they'll see that this isn't, we're not after them, but we're protecting them. And it's similar to in our neighborhood and many high-risk neighborhoods for crime. You'll see armed guards located within the building, stores, offices, or having to go through, plexiglass for screening. And clients become traumatized. They'll have a flashback instantly if they have to pass through those things. So as a field trip, we walk them through and say, this is safety. They're not there to say, we found you. We're here to say, we're going to protect you, so that there is any type of crime. Our role here is to protect and not to attack. So many opportunities we have to help with the mental health piece, but also in preparing them for employment. So the wonderful thing about Freedom House is that when someone comes to the organization from anywhere around the world, so all regions of the world have been represented. Currently, we have 62 people. We have 15 children, one who's just a few months old and adorable, and about 7 or 8 languages. So when you come into that community, and there's this tug of war. Imagine having to flee your country, leave your family behind, your business, your prestige, any one of us who have income, and we're sustainable, and we have privilege to use that income in various ways. People who flee their countries lose all that opportunity and find themselves in a shelter. So I'm going to pick on Kelly because she's up in a beautiful place and she's got this beautiful background, and I'm incredibly jealous, and that's probably why I'm going to pick on her. But she's in Petoskey and having a wonderful time. This isn't uncommon for people where they lived, right? They were near water. They had resorts too, right? And Kelly, we're going to force you now into a shelter with people from all over around the world, and you're not going to be able to afford anything, because the law says while you're applying for asylum, you cannot work. And by the way, you can't get any mainstream benefits. So don't look for food stamps, and don't look for health insurance. Don't look to get a driver's license. Don't look, to get a library card. All of these things, because the law says an income is prohibited while you're applying for asylum. And
I actually have a question about that. Yeah, so Deb and myself and Kim Johnson were on. Angela Moore has a wonderful show on Sundays on 9-10 a.m.
Yep.
And you mentioned this on that show, and it blew my mind to even consider the fact that asylum seekers are prohibited from working. So number one, what's the asylum seeker population that are we looking at for both the United States? And then you mentioned an Atlanta person came to Detroit. So are there organizations, just the world of support for asylum seekers? But then how long are they with you? Can you kind of help us understand that piece of maybe it's the legality journey. If they're not permitted to work, how do they survive in the United States
Right.
during that process?
So I don't know numbers, nationally, but at Freedom House, but I can tell you there are hundreds and thousands. TRAC, it's a legal tracking, and they keep track of asylums and regions, backlogs, and I know the Detroit office, there's thousands of backlogs. So partly because of the pandemic, right? Everything was shut down, both legally, the offices were closed, but then the embassies closed. So, everything had to stop. But even prior to that, because of the conflicts around the world, you could see civil wars, uprests, the whole aspect. So people were really fleeing. Um, in terms of around the nation, well, Freedom House is a pioneer. And when we began, again, nearly 40 years ago, there weren't. And as we were saying, so many people don't know of us and so many people don't even know where we are because early days, we really had to keep it low, right? You wanted to protect your clients. Our origins are people fleeing the El Salvadorian War and they were going to Canada. And in Southwest Detroit, it was just inundated with people, and Canada couldn't manage. They were either detaining people, rejecting people. The numbers were just unbelievable. So Detroit Windsor Coalition was formed to help prepare and plan for trips across the border. So Freedom, the Detroit side, we prepared, did the administrative work, got the applications ready, had any evidence they required, and then volunteers would drive them over, vanfuls, but all with appointments, and that helped systematize it a bit. And then 5 years later, we became Freedom House Detroit, still helping people get to Canada, but also focusing a lot on the United States, people seeking asylum in the United States. And then Freedom House became Freedom House Detroit because there are many shelters, domestic violence mostly, that were Freedom House. And so we wanted to put our origins. So we are a pioneer, and we are one of, for a long time, the only, and we still remain the only full service asylum program in Michigan. Now, as time has come by and time has grown and asylum seekers are plentiful, and legally eligible to come to the United States, have to be clear. This is a legal right to seek asylum. However you get into the country, you're legally eligible to apply for asylum. And so there are now programs. We have a sister program in Buffalo, New York, Vive, which is a offshoot, if you were umbrella under Jericho Road. And there are programs and same thing, they help, they're right on the border of Canada. So there historically has been helping people get across to Canada, but now they are including US asylum seekers in their work. So then there are some in Chicago that work exclusively with the LGBTQ community. There's a program in Baltimore, that's Asylum Women Enterprise, or AWE, a great organization. And they provide housing or help find housing for women. So it's particular to women. There are some faith-based programs in Boston that focus a lot on the Ugandan, Grand Rapids, and Kent County. They have a lot of Rwandese. So we're now starting to see places building up to protect asylum seekers, or just kind of help them get through. Another program in Fort Worth, Dallas area called us as they were building their ministry, and theirs is faith-based, but they walked away with our rules, they walked away with our policy, everything we could throw at them to say, this is how it works. We want you to build that in Dallas, Fort Worth. So that's kind of, so there are programs, but there are so few that provide the one-stop shop that Freedom House provides. So when you come in, you're going to get the needs you have met. You're going to, get your legal aid right on site, and that is huge. So if you visit our website, you'll see our statistics are quite impressive because we have a very high success rate of asylums, affirmative asylums, because that's all we do. We don't do overstayers. We don't do, we'll do family if it's related to our client, but asylum is all we do. So that means that when the asylum application is mailed to Nebraska, I believe, is the clearinghouse, and when it gets in the hands of the asylum officer, there isn't much they can just scan it through, highlight. Very, very seldom is something missing. And if it's missing, there's a note that says this could not be obtained. When embassies closed because of war, people had to go hundreds of miles through war-torn countries to go to another embassy, and we would explain that. So if when an asylum officer looks at that application, it's quite thorough. And then the interview process that goes on for the affirmative is just to review the application, but the claimant has to tell their story. And the legal part of it is the claimant is not allowed to have any notes. You're not allowed to bring your application and kind of, well, down here on page whatever. That's not how it works. You have to remember. So when they're during the interview, and having to remember all that. And so think of that now without having a place to live, without having nutrition, without having mental health services, and with the years of wait, 5 years for some to even get an interview. You have to hold on to that stuff because that story is your lifeline to survival at the end of however many years it takes. So we're seeing asylum services grow, legal aid at the border, but still the services to help people recover from traumatic events is for some happenstance, and we're proud to be a place where now we put our name out. And of course, the internet is marvelous because now if someone says, political safety, asylum, any type of key word, it'll come to Freedom House Detroit. And that's how they find us. And while the stories are just so heartbreaking, and you wonder how could people be so cruel, they're forms of torture. I can't tell you, but think of the worst thing that could happen, genital mutilation, grocery bags, those plastic bags being melted on your genitals or on your back. That's the type of torture these people experience. And so when they come to the United States or need help, imagine not being able to be treated for something like that. And then imagine going into a grocery store and every bag they give you is going to remind you that this is what happened to me. So it's a process that, and then a few years ago, the former administration made a ruling that now asylum seekers have to wait 365 days from the date they submit their application. They have to wait, and they say 365 days before they can even apply. So that's a whole year. And then if it takes 8 months to complete the application, because you have to get evidence, you have to, the bravery of people back home helping to get verification. So if I'm applying for asylum because of my political opinion, I'm going to know who the United States president is. I got to know who my, Andy Levin is my rep. I have to know Debbie Stabenow's name. I have to know who's in my party, locally. I belong to the NAACP. Who's the president? I have to be able to prove those things off the top of my head. And also I have to be able to give testimony to things. And when I can get minutes, for instance, you thank God for the internet now, because in the old days you had to call home and say, can somebody get me something that shows I was at that meeting? But now with the internet, you can just Google it. And oftentimes it'll, if you Google and your name will pop up in minutes or things like that. So it's pretty incredible about how long they have to wait to get all their application put together. And at Freedom House and many asylum programs now, through help with the Doctors Without Borders, they help establish some criteria for asylum seekers. And that is that when there's a psychological assessment and when there's a medical exam, they're very clear to say, these are the things that you want to indicate in those exams that will help the asylum officer understand and kind of give validity to the claimant's complaint, if you would. So I have been explaining those tortures, right? So then a medical affidavit along would be, say, the burn marks reflect, when this person arrived, the store brand was, kind of tattooed onto their back, or the genital mutilation. So they're very, very specific. They may have other problems because of torture, but if they can't document it, if they can't say this related to the torture, that isn't as important. And then for the psychological exam, these are the forms of torture they endured, and flashbacks, PTSD, trouble sleeping, um, hormonal changes. All of these things are important to document and then between the medical and the psychosocial. So, Freedom House Detroit, the remarkable organization that we are, we have the components in our program to make sure these happen. So, Freedom Lives when is our shelter. Freedom Lives is the food and clothing we provide, and a case manager to help navigate and immediately say, welcome to Freedom House. We're going to help you, but our goal is to kick you out and get you into your own house. Hallelujah, right? Then we have Freedom Aids, and Freedom Aids is our attorney and our housing manager. So that means that when they're meeting with the lawyer, they're consistently reviewing documents, making sure. Now, the law requires them to be in English. If you remember, I said we had 7 languages in the house, and so all of it has to be translated. And again, through the goodness of people, we have volunteer translators, and sometimes, of course, we do pay because we need accurate translations to regions, not just language. And so that's our Freedom Aids. And then we have another program, the housing. Again, we have a case manager who navigates the medical care and the psychosocial services, Freedom Cares. And with Wayne State University and their global health, we are able to pull together a program where our clients, again, who come from corrupt governments, and if you go to the hospital, the government will treat. That's how oftentimes they find people. So they don't go to the hospitals. They don't want to get a medical report because then they'll be discovered and they could be kidnapped from the hospital. Here, it's of course very different, our HIPAA laws, and explaining that to our clients. But Freedom Aids allows them. So, for instance, when someone living in the house presents a problem, and we're able to do a virtual meeting such as this to say, is this something they should go to the hospital for, or is this something urgent care, or do you think it can wait until I make a medical appointment for them? So it's all the clients doing the talking. We're not talking, but in the end, the medical provider at the other side of the conversation will say, yeah, this is pretty significant. I think you should get them to the ER. Urgent care would be the best, oftentimes with children and fevers and rashes or things like that. And then other times, this is trauma related. I suggest you, if you could push up the appointment for their mental health provider. In addition, they do these wonderful conversations, much like this. They're trainings, but we find when we call them conversations, they go a lot further. And we did great work with COVID. There was so much misinformation. And when you come from corrupt countries and, you're so easy to hear and not believe the stories. And but so we'd have conversations about COVID. What is it? And as we were getting prior to the vaccinations, we were having conversations. How do you protect yourself? Let's get together and remember hand washing, help each other. And then we would have conversations about the vaccine, fact from fiction. Then we would also have conversations about the flu. How do you prevent the flu? A child would have a runny nose and parents would come in and say, I got to take them to the hospital. They have a fever. And I don't know about you, if you have kids, or I know as a kid, my mom would be like, yeah, get in the bathtub. We'll fix this later. So, everybody wants to go to the hospital because it's new to them, right? So Freedom Cares has wonderful engagement with social workers, medical providers, and mental health services. Then Freedom Works, and this is the success of all of the services provided, gets people ready for employment. Now go back to Kelly, who came to Freedom House, doesn't speak English, has no cultural awareness. She is included in all of these services, and now it's time to get ready for work. What's work like in the United States? We're going to teach you how to write a US resume. We're going to teach you how to address someone in authority. Many people will call. We had a client from Nigeria who went on a job interview and called the woman Ma. And she said, oh, that is so inappropriate. And we missed that. It's a cultural thing. It's a sign of respect to an older woman. Well, or a woman. And in this case, she didn't understand that. And so we were able to go back and add that to our curriculum, right? Hey, this isn't how you communicate on the job. This is what we're going to do. So Kelly, we're going to teach you how to dress, how to present yourself. Some cultures um, dress what I will just be blunt. In the United States, many people think it's provocative. So many cultures really like tight clothing. They like, um, fishnets and things like that. And so we're like, well, that's fine what you can wear in your community and with friends, but at the workplace, this is pretty much what's expected. This is what we call the casual workplace. This is the business. So we really work on that. Men too, just help them, with I have to say, most of the men, you give them a suit and they're just so happy. So we don't have a lot of problems. They love to dress professionally. Um, and then we have wonderful programs. And if any of you have an opportunity to help us with that, because we do volunteer services, our clients go out. And so once they apply for work authorization, they can go out and volunteer. It cannot be anything lending, it can't be a paid internship, but they volunteer. So Beaumont and Grosse Pointe has been fabulous, Betsy Schulte, because she puts our clients everywhere. And our clients we have one who got her asylum 5 years later, still working at Beaumont. And many of them want to go into a medical field, and Beaumont is, you work in any part of that hospital for a year, and then you're eligible for transfer and then move into more medical direction and nursing, or, in management, the things that they want to do. Henry Ford, we had a couple doctors with us. The one who promised me that he was going to find a cure COVID vaccine. He was a microbiologist and did work back home in, I believe it was Congo. And so he went to Henry Ford. Guess who's working at Henry Ford? We had a surgeon who was with Doctors Without Borders. And, he was performing surgery. And then 2 weeks later, he's in our shelter and then volunteered at Wayne State. So there are many opportunities for people to volunteer, and they bring excellent work skills. I mean, the work ethic is present. You never, to a fault, they'll come back and say, I got in trouble because I worked past my break, or my coworker's mad at me because I took an extra Saturday, or whatever it is. But they have the work ethic. Many times they have to learn the rules in America, and that's our Freedom Works. And then we have a Freedom Talks, which is this, right, where we're educating people about Freedom House, helping a little bit to conquer some of the myths and, frankly, the lies about asylum seekers and their purpose to come to the United States, and to help encourage people to spread the word of welcoming and, the process and how challenging it is. Just last Thursday.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, you've just listed incredible programs, amazing. I can see how Freedom House Detroit is maybe a bit of a unique in the country, because you're just providing such a wide range. What made you decide, if we can take a few minutes to talk about your Impact 100 grant, and what made you decide to, if you can explain the project, and then why that particular project, especially looking at all of these other projects that you also have done, what made this initiative rise to what you wanted to have the grant and ultimately what you received?
Okay. So I told Kelly this. I purposely put this picture back here, and I pray it doesn't fall because it's on a push pin. But I purposely put this here because if you're like me and you look at that, I get very calm and relaxed. In fact, my house, my sister says, you have just this affinity for water and bridges. Yes, I do. It's very calming. It's very relaxing. I can visualize myself being there. And for many coming from the countries that they do, they're near a sea. Many of them have access to beautiful lakes and waters. So I think for our proposal and the grant from Impact 100 is, in a short, I will go into more detail, but in a short, to bring people an opportunity to have this vision, but a reality of fresh air, green space, a place to enjoy life, safety, a place where others can join us, our neighborhood can be a part of it, where our mental health and our physical health are going to improve, because we're now in this space of the air and the beauty of greenery. And so we have a beautiful front lawn, 1,600 square feet to be exact, But wouldn't you know it, there's a big berm right in front of it. So it's the kids love it. And, my first job when we got there was to teach them how to roll down the hill. And that is the job for every new child. That's what I do. Let's roll down the hill. But that hill has to go. When we have a picnic or we do something outside, we can't sit there because, the chair will literally roll down. So it's really unusable. Our folks love, as you can imagine, from around the world, soccer or football, or not our football, but football as it's known, soccer, and volleyball, very common games. And then the kids just need a place to have a playscape, the swings and jump rope and the things that kids like to do and that are healthy for them outdoors. So where we're located is really a speedway. I have to tell you, now that COVID's over, we're reading about, how there's these race cars and people are just terrorizing neighborhoods. Well, we're not being terrorized, but we're certainly in a place where cars speed back and forth. And our front space, we want protected for our kids and our residents. So we approached Impact 100 for now what I'm going to call a sacred space. So we could take that 1,600 square feet and make it into a beautiful community space, extend our social services space, quite frankly, so that clients can go out and on an evening they can, or afternoon, I guess, I can't be picky, play volleyball and have a space where they could play soccer. And then the kids, safety to go out and play. And the neighborhood kids come over. I can't tell you, I don't know. I say how many kids we have in the house, but if I counted them by how many are outside playing, the kids come across from the neighborhoods and it's endearing. A dad walks the little boy over and he says, my kid says he can play here. I go, yeah, this is it. They don't come in, but this is what they do. So a playscape for the children, some normalcy, right? And then the beauty of having some a pergola with lights over it, right? So we could have asylum parties or family birthday parties or adult birthday parties, or when someone's get their asylum, or when it's just hard to sleep and a staff person, we're 24-hour staff, can sit outside and say, let's just sit here for a minute and listen to the crickets, or obviously this is summer, but let's just sit for a minute and pause. A place where we could take our laptops. The clients can go out and do their resume building. Place where they can sit and get their evidence, communicate with folks about their needs for their asylum application. Just outside where we could have gardens, flower gardens, where we could have a little vegetable garden and trees everywhere, just so that we're reminded that life extends outside of ourselves. And, if any of you are in the medical field, that nature is a huge contribution to healing. I live near Lake St. Clair, and just being able to ride my bike and even if I just get there and I just sit and watch the water for a while, or I'll go through, the nature trail and listen to it, even in the winter, it's just amazing the opportunities. So nature is the part of the healing, and they come from countries with agricultural backgrounds where this is what, it looked like, and this is what it feels like. So we're really excited for bringing a health and wellness to our outdoor space. And also health, we weren't able, you want to say so many things in an application, but you say, put it in 300 words or whatever. But, it's like Michelle Obama, when she said, we need to take care of our kids' nutrition. Our kids could sit and eat cupcakes all day long, right? But if they eat the junk food, then they have to run, they have to play, they have to get outside. They have to do some physical exercise, and that helps them as well, because our children are also the victims. If they weren't physically, many of them were physically tortured, but the emotional trauma of witnessing, of being part of the fleeing, of running with their mouth covered or sleeping under mattresses because they cry, they have to overcome their trauma as well. And medically, if you do a child's MRI when they arrive and you can see the brain where the trauma, then after some playtime and exercise and feeling connected, the brain changes. I mean, their trauma, it changes. And so why, thanks to Impact 100, if we can make that kind of significant change, why wouldn't we? So this outdoor space, and as a staff person looking forward to it, because our staff, can you imagine just sitting outside and being able to talk and not be hearing, machines and the kitchen's busy and people in social spaces. It's a wonderful opportunity, and we're just delighted. And we'll have a nice decorative fence around it. But also importantly, we're in Southwest Detroit, and it is a wonderful, vibrant Latinx working class. And so when we're able to say, we want you, we'll put up a fence, but we're going to say, here's the opening, and you got to come through us. We don't want just anybody coming in, but we want to include you. So we're even just yesterday, I had a meeting where we're planning on welcoming the neighborhood. When we're ready and this space has been created, our first thing is to have sort of an open house welcome to our neighbors. We'll walk around, and first privilege, the VIP tickets go to all the kids' families that come and play. But then, to open it to our neighbors and say, this is in your neighborhood, and we want you to know, we're part of that, and we want to be. We hope you pick up on the vibrancy. So it's a lovely, lovely community, and this will only enhance it, and we hope encourage others to develop their space as well.
It's just so wonderful to think that I think what many of us maybe take for granted in our backyards and our homes is creating our own external spaces, to think about how impactful that is for an organization like Freedom House Detroit that is doing such incredible work. I just looked at the time. This has absolutely flown by. There are two questions that came in that I want to make sure we address. Number one, can you say the name of the restaurant that was downtown Detroit again from one of your alumni?
Baoba Fare. Baobfare.
All right, we will look that up as well. Thank you for sharing.
It's original East African, so it's not in and out. They prepare the food, so plan for an hour and a half if you're going to take your lunch there. But it's so worth it.
And then thank you. Another question we had is just, I think many of us perhaps weren't as aware of just the idea of asylum, and how can we learn more? Are there books? Are there areas that you would suggest, resources that can help us become more educated, to talk to other individuals, to help them understand that this isn't illegal immigration? This is asylum seekers are their own journey that we need that we can become better educated on?
Well, I can say Freedom House. So anyone can call us, and we're happy to give these talks through virtually or in person. And we go everywhere. We in this case, because Impact 100 funded us, but we ask for a small stipend if possible. And we'll go in and we'll talk to faith-based group educators. I've been in workplaces where, we're looking for contributions of support, and go into the workplace. And when they have staff training, we'll go and talk then. So, absolutely follow us on our social media and our website. We have that information. But there is also the immigration. It's track. I will send some websites. I'm not familiar with them right now, but United States Homeland Security, they throw statistics out. But UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner, UNHCR, they are an excellent resource for finding global and as well as local resources. Doctors Without Borders. These are all Amnesty International, another great organization where you will find information. And I think the part about, is just recognizing that people are human. And if we're uncomfortable with change, or we're uncomfortable with a shift of being with someone of a different culture, then we have to know that that's the problem, not the person coming. And I don't know that any, website will help that, other than challenging ourselves, and as women, we've been victims of that forever, right? Just always being the one that, has to put up, the extra foot forward. But I think that's the main message, but then you'll hear about all this aspects of people needing safety and why, right? We'll be astounded. We are not an advocacy organization. We do not do any type of advocacy. So I can't share, my own personal opinions here, but you will find that there are letter writing and campaigns all over that are meant to really help us understand that in our country, and we have a voice and we need to use it. And that's just a really important. I'm going to look at my phone for a second because I just got an email this morning and I can't think of the name of the organization. But
as you're looking real quickly, I do want to just let everyone know, now that Deb and the Freedom House Detroit are part of our grant recipients, they're part of the Impact family, and we will be looking for opportunities for our women to support the work of Freedom House Detroit. In addition to our grant, Coleman Yoakum likes to call it Impact Plus. The impact only started with the check. And so we'll continue to find ways to stay super connected with Deb and Freedom House Detroit. So this will not be the only and last time from a conversation standpoint. And now that Deb is a member herself, she can bring her insights as a nonprofit leader. This has just been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
I am so grateful for your time. What was it called?
Strangers No Longer.
Okay.
Is one of the organizations. And the other thing I want to say, because I will be amiss if I don't, shamelessly, we are planning our Voices of Freedom event. And so if you are someone who is willing to join that committee, we need to do outreach, we need sponsors, we need to sell tickets. There's a lot of, our website has the information. It is the coolest fundraiser you'll ever attend because it is so cultural. The food, I'm a foodie, can you tell? So go to our website. And if you just want to be with a group, work hard, but to be able to help spread the word, some marketing, being a Facebook ambassador and help us spread the word, that's what we could all do together. So
we can take that on. If nothing else, we all need to go follow and like, and we'll put the date of your event on. We'll make sure that we promote that. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Deb, for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
And
if anyone wants to email me privately for more questions, I am available. So this ends here, but love you all. And so I'm happy to keep talking, or if you want to invite me, just email me, drennan@freedomhousedetroit.org.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Deb. Have a great day.
Enjoy your time up there. All right.
I will.
Sorry I picked on you, but
only a few more days. Oh no, I deserve to be picked on. I'm fortunate.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I just have one question. Maybe we can ask Deb does she want her email on the podcast?
I'll ask her. I would feel very confident the answer will be yes.
Yeah.
But we can shoot her. And she said she saw the disclaimer. So I think she's already turned it in. Okay. But if she hasn't, she knows that she was given, it was sent to her by someone.
Perfect. Thank you. All
right,
ladies. Enjoy. Bye.